Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 35 of your favorite YouTube series, our favorite YouTube series as well, Not Another Demo. People are always asking me, Matt, why is it the favorite YouTube series of everyone? Well, because as you know, we get caught up in lots and lots of meetings all the time, and they're always the same, and they're always kind of the same flow, and we are bringing you something slightly different. No marketing, no acronyms, no PowerPoint presentations, just a real conversation with the vendor. And today we are super excited to have with us Gus Evangelakos. Did I get close on that one? I think so.
Perfect.
From Orca, and we're going to be talking about cloud security because we are the Cloud Security Alliance of West Michigan, so this is a good topic for us to have. So, Gus, I'm going to pass this over to you to do introductions of yourself and Orca. And then maybe, we always throw out the first softball question, and that is, and we talked about this a little bit before, of like we have meetings across our calendar, across our lunches, post pandemic, we are meeting crazy. But why would someone want to spend an hour talking with you and Orca?
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So my name is, again, it's Gus Evangelakos. I'm Director of Field Engineering here at Orca Security. And, the main reason why someone should spend some time with Orca Security is if you're in the cloud or thinking about going to the cloud, there's a lot of things that can be misconfigured in the cloud, right? And basically, the most important part here is how can I identify everything that we're putting up there and do it in a way that I don't have any gaps from agents or having 5-6 different solutions trying to figure out what my risks are, and just have an easy way to just simply connect my cloud accounts and identify different types of risks without worrying about if I have coverage or not. And Orca Security basically came up with this agentless workload visibility, which covers both CSPM and workloads in 2019, and basically have been leading the market thereafter with that.
So let's talk a little bit about why so many vulnerabilities up in the cloud. I think originally the thought was that the cloud would be more secure, that we'd have less problems if we moved everything to the cloud. It was going to be cheaper, better, faster, and more secure. I think as we've moved into the last few years of companies becoming more cloud centric and more cloud focused, they're realizing that the security piece isn't there. So what are some of the reasons behind there being such a lack of security with the cloud providers?
I think it just comes back to the basic shared responsibility model and really understanding what that means, right? It's understanding that there's responsibilities for the infrastructure to be secure from the cloud providers, but at the same time, the things that you're building and the applications you're running have to be secured by you. And there is some other confusion sometimes if you take into account like Lambda functions, right? The runtimes. It's up to the vendor to give you an updated runtime, for example, that is more secure and doesn't have vulnerabilities, but it's up to the customer to go and run that code in the updated runtime. So sometimes that clarity is not really there. And on the other hand, obviously, there's a lot of things that customers are running in the cloud, and it could be anything from a Log4j vulnerability where you're reacting to things. Yeah. But at the same time, it's also about how you manage those and how the current solutions from the past are not really effective when you take into account how the cloud is configured. So that's probably one of the bigger challenges I would say for customers is really identifying like what am I supposed to work on first, even if it's just a simple vulnerability on 1,000 servers.
Yeah, so let's talk about how you guys solve for that then. What are you doing in this space to give companies visibility into their configurations, vulnerabilities, et cetera?
So the first thing is like removing the agent friction, right? If you're talking about just simply understanding what exists in my cloud, the biggest truth you can do is just simply asking the cloud provider themselves via their APIs, right? If I want to know how many workloads are there, just query the EC2 endpoint and just figure out how many do I have. That's how you're going to get really the truth and then understand, okay, I need to scan 100 EC2s rather than trying to fight and install 5 different agents, one for vulnerabilities, one for inventory, one for malware, and trying to figure out, are they all deployed, are they not deployed, like that constant maintenance. And even sometimes literally having to detect new vulnerabilities, you have to update an agent, which causes a lot of problems. So that gap in visibility from the agent perspective, first of all, gives you gaps, and the other one, it doesn't give you context when you think about, using, for instance, I know we're not supposed to use acronyms, but a CSPM, right? I'm sure.
You can use it. Do you just now you're forced to tell us what that stands for?
Yeah, so cloud security posture management initially came across to address the problems of the cloud configurations, right? The security groups, VPC, role, permissions, policies, etc. But they didn't give you any context into the workloads and containers and what vulnerabilities, secrets, passwords are on the actual systems themselves. So oftentimes you have a CSPM and then you have a separate vulnerability tool. And the problem comes down to prioritization, right? If the vulnerability tool is basically telling me I have a CVSS, 10 vulnerability and it's on 1,000 machines, then the next step is, okay, well, which ones are these? Especially if you're using it for on-prem and cloud, you have to figure out which ones live in the cloud, which ones are actually exposed to the internet, how are they exposed to the internet? Because the question comes down to, if it's a remote executable vulnerability, remote code execution, the first thing you want to do is reduce the risk from the outside. And if you don't know that, you're spending hours trying to investigate, just the vulnerability information from that vulnerability tool, and then you have to go to your CSPM and try to figure out how all this stuff combines, which obviously can lead to a reduction in remediation time and also some confusion as if you reduce risk or not, right? And so for us, basically what we do is we said this doesn't work anymore. You can't just take the old products and put them in the cloud and say, well, they work. Because yeah, an agent can work on a laptop and it can work on an EC2, but does it mean it's really helping you, right? Is it helping you address risk? So we came up with a different way of doing things and using snapshot capabilities of the cloud providers and creating a data model that always takes into account both the cloud configuration and the workload vulnerabilities, malware, secrets, and all PII information, stuff like that, and simply telling you, don't worry about 1,000 servers, for example, that have log4j. Worry about these 10 because based on the security group configuration, load balancers, there is a path from the outside for this to be actually exploited.
So I think one of the things, and I want to talk about it a little bit more, that you mentioned, and there was the prioritization thing, because I think as we, as security teams are already overwhelmed, and now we're looking at, a bunch of more alerts and misconfigurations and things coming in from the cloud, it is a real struggle to know, what is an actual vulnerability versus, one that maybe isn't. And, scoring can help, but it isn't always, an exact science. I mean, sometimes a CVSS 8 might be, more critical than a 10 just because it's out in the wild or something's happening. So I guess, how are you guys helping with the prioritization of all these different misconfigurations?
I mean, there's differences between an automated method and then a manual method, right? The automated method, it really depends on the collection of data that you can get and being able not just to see a vulnerable package, but also sometimes the configurations, right? Because sometimes the configuration can alleviate the CVE from being exploited. So having that info and then being able to, again, map it to, let's say, an attack path, right? Sometimes it's not just about the system, it's also about what happens once an attacker is on that system, and understanding that they can get to a S3 bucket, for example, that has PII, even though that bucket is not exposed itself. And so a lot of the automated prioritizations for us come into play with, what's the attack vector of the CVE? Is there actual active exploits out there? Like, are there, exploit, like you said, right? You might have a CVSS 8 that's higher prioritized because there's actual exploit code that someone can use rather than a theoretical exploit on a CVSS 10 that no one can really get to. Yeah. So that always ties into the prioritization from the automated side. And then you also have, you have to have a good research team, right? That's really the manual side where you have a research team and they're up to date with the CVEs that are coming about. And can they actually go and figure out, is this exploitable? Should we bump this up for our customers so they're more aware, and being able to intervene and say, you know what, this is something that you need to focus on, even though it has a lesser CVSS score because of these factors. And that really comes down to having a great research team, basically.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense to me. So when we're talking about, cloud, that can also mean a lot of different things. We've got multiple different providers. We've got public and private and. So, is Orca, if I'm an organization looking at, this type of technology, is Orca able to cover all of the above? Are there some that you work with, some that you don't? And just talk through the platform a little bit.
Obviously the major three, right? AWS, GCP, and Azure. Alibaba, has come across as well. And then you also have Oracle Cloud, which is obviously coming up. So those are things that we can work with. On the other hand, you also have a lot of the, AWS, GCP, and Azure instances, but they have to be isolated. Like if you're talking about China, right? Like China is completely separated. So we have to have POPs for that. We have GovCloud, so we have POPs for that. So based on regulation, some of those are also their own POPs, but all of them are pretty much supported. I would say probably one of the other things, like we don't do anything on-prem, obviously, right? We are cloud focused and cloud first. But there are some cases like OpenShift clusters that you might want to scan that, you need to connect. So in that case, we can do that, as well as having like CLI tools for image scanning, infrastructure as code scanning that you can even run on your laptop locally if you want, and be able to implement in any CI/CD pipeline, basically.
Yeah. So what does implementation of Orca look like?
That is probably the number one reason why customers are coming to us, because typically when you think about what tools do I need for cloud security, right? And you have an agent-based solution, and let's say you have, 40,000 VMs in your environment, and you have another 40,000 containers that run simultaneously, et cetera. A lot of times the conversations you're first going to have is, how are we going to get this agent deployed? What systems are supported? Do we need to increase CPU to support another agent, right? There's a lot of complexity and friction with that. At Orca, the conversation is different. It's more about, do you have 15 minutes to deploy a role and a policy? And that is it. So it literally takes 15 minutes. And that is one of the biggest use cases, honestly, is when we talk to a lot of practitioners or CISOs. If you just simply ask, do you know everything that's going on in your cloud? A lot of times you get the answer of, I don't know. I really do not know what's happening up there. And they have a challenge because, again, they're trying to fit 4 or 5 different solutions, some of them, again, being lift and shift from the on-prem world, and it's not really giving them that context that they need. And so for us, it really does take 20 minutes to connect. Most of the 20 minutes is literally logging into AWS and clicking stack sets, but the whole process will take between 10 to 20 minutes, and that is
Right.
it. You don't need to do anything after that.
Yeah. So with all that visibility, then, can I assume correctly that you also have use cases outside of just security? So if my general, cloud operations team or cloud architects, want to be able to log into Orca to see, any other type of data you guys might be exposing, is that something you guys are also touting?
Absolutely. One of the things about being agentless and just querying APIs is that we have a lot of data that we just model. You have a query capability. So when our research team creates an alert, the alert itself shows you the query that they're doing, and you can actually just write your own queries using the same exact language. So we have many customers that sometimes during POC processes will give us a list of like, hey, here's 500 custom controls that we currently have with our existing CSPM, for example, or things along those lines, and you can easily just create them right with the query language. Some of the other more recent use cases, because some of the things, like if you think about, if you have to install an agent, obviously a system has to be running, right? But since we're using snapshot capabilities, we're basically looking at the volume. So we don't care if a VM is on or not. So what we can actually tell you is stop VMs. We can also give you some cost optimization of things that aren't being used, things that are just sitting there idly for years that, can save you a lot of money. And we recently had a customer that basically found almost like $300,000 worth of stale items that, they were happy to clean up just simply using our query capabilities.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, go ahead, Lloyd. Oh, I was going to say, you mentioned a number of use cases there, but let's say I'm a customer that's brand new to cloud, and I'll pick on insurance since Anthony's here. And I'm trying to identify some of those use cases to do that proof of concept or proof of value. What would you say stands out as a good first use case being new to cloud that we could bring into Orca to prove that out?
The very first thing I would tell you is visibility. A lot of customers we have seen have been surprised. Forget just the assets, just even the accounts under an organization that they had no idea about, right? You have some developer that might create an account for a testing environment. None of the controls that are supposed to be installed are installed anywhere in there. You have exposed VMs, you have exposed APIs, and it just really gives them an idea of like what is happening in my cloud presence. The other thing, just even at a basic inventory level, if you have 500 AWS accounts, you have 500 projects, multiple subscriptions, logging into every single account and portal, trying to figure out where things are, that's a challenge in itself, right? Just having one place to just simply identify your entire inventory of assets across every account, every cloud provider, and a simple, way to query them. Like a VM, for example, is a VM. It doesn't matter if it's an AWS, GCP, or Azure. We just want to find VMs, right? Or containers or images. So all that stuff is very simply put in there. One of the other things that I would probably say is oftentimes it's customers are just not aware of how big the vulnerability problem is. And what they end up finding is a lot of gaps from the agent deployments. And the most severe I would probably say is when we find malware, because I've had a customer basically say, Orca is great, it looks good, but we use Microsoft Defender and everything Microsoft offers, right? And I'm like, okay, well, you get a free assessment, free 30-day assessment, you can test it out, see what we find. They did it. We found 44 Azure servers fully compromised with crypto mining. And then after some investigation, they found out first that they were cloning some GitHub repos that already had malware in it. And the other one was that no one ever installed the Defender agent on it. So they had no idea that it was missing. Even just from those built-in tools, you still have to have a process to get them deployed. And that's pretty much what it comes down to, is like the eye-opening effect of what's out there. And this is just a vulnerability.
So if I'm using, like, just as an example, infrastructure as a service, in Azure, and I use, we'll just say, hypothetically, I will say I use SentinelOne to secure those devices. Could Orca tell me where I have gaps in that installation for that infrastructure?
Absolutely. Because we have so much information, because we can read the volume without affecting any workload, right? We don't touch anything on the running workloads. We can basically do as deep of a scan as we want on that volume, because it's just a snapshot. So from that, we actually do look at all the installed packages, and many customers actually, we have a compliance part as well, right? So you can actually create a custom compliance framework and pick which controls are relevant to you. And you can also create custom alerts to add as part of those frameworks, so you automatically have those checks in there. One very common one is to write a query that says, show me any VM without an installed package called SentinelOne or CrowdStrike, right? Or Defender, and just find, okay, where are these VMs or containers, for example, that might be missing specific packages that you expect from your controls.
How often is interesting talking about the visibility piece? And I think like Lloyd, to your point, I think we feel like in West Michigan sometimes there's companies that haven't maybe made this jump into the cloud or whatever, but like how often do you find when you go in and do say your eval where like, oh, we're way more in the cloud than we thought we were?
Most customers don't know how many assets they have. Typically, they know how many accounts or subscriptions they have, but just thinking about how am I going to get visibility across 600 projects for GCP, for example, might be a daunting thought. Let alone, okay, we have 600 projects. What's in them? How do we start monitoring what's in them, right? And then understanding like how much of our controls actually can cover these things. So from that aspect, I mean, customers do see a lot of things, and they're more, I would say, eye-opening when we discover the risks. That's really also where it comes into play, when they start seeing like, hey, people are typing in clear text passwords to connect to RDS databases, and all you have to do is print the bash history, right? Or having SSH boxes configured with the, password as password, and they're exposed via security group, just waiting for an attacker to, do a dictionary attack or whatever. So that's a lot of the things that customers are like, holy cow, I had no idea this was going on. And sometimes, even if you're talking about like functions like Lambda or Azure Function Apps, you'd be surprised how many times we find like secrets in the environmental variables. I've seen everything from access keys, passwords, even like O365 username and passwords to log in. So, and all you need is list permissions for that, right? You don't need anything else to just see what's there. So it really comes down to the fine-grained details that, I don't know how many vulnerability managers are checking for weak host passwords, to be honest with you, or CSPMs for that matter on workloads, but that's the capabilities that you can do when you have, the side scanning.
So let's talk a little bit about, and I guess we have started some with the evaluation, but let's talk about working with Orca as a company. So can you give us a little bit of an idea of what the pre-sales motion looks like? Maybe talk a little bit more about what that evaluation looks like, and then sometimes more importantly, like long term. I've now gone through the process. I've acquired Orca. I have this great product or tool that I'm using now. How do I ensure that I'm getting the most out of it and all of that? So maybe talk about the post-sales and the continued partnership process as well.
Absolutely. So from a pre-sales perspective, the most important thing, and going to the context of your show, not another demo, right? It's like not another POC that I'm not going to do anything with.
Yes, this could be another show, actually.
Yeah. So I would say the most important part is really understanding the customer's pain points, right? And if you don't ask questions to like understand, like why are we even here? Why, what's the testing? What are you trying to identify? That's probably the most important thing, right? Because if you're trying to show someone container issues and they're not writing containers, or if someone says we're completely serverless, right? And you're ready to go and say, oh, look, all the VM problems we have, you need to understand the customer's pain points. So for us, we always ask, like, what are you trying to achieve? Do you have any RFPs or anything that we need to help you answer? We are always happy to go through that checklist and make sure, hey, we can do this, we can't do this, et cetera. And then from that point on, it's just a matter of scheduling the call or, sending instructions. That's the good part too, is like the instructions are so simple. It's like a 3-step process. You log in, you click a CloudFormation template, and then you just put in the ARN. The same thing with Azure and GCP, right? Just obviously different scripts there, but it takes 20 minutes. And a lot of customers sometimes are like, is this it? And that's pretty much it, right? And, the biggest thing that most customers say is, I can't believe how much stuff you've done in a matter of hours. Because, if you're used to, like, I come from an endpoint security background as well. And from endpoint security, you're like, hey, can you just install this on 10 systems and nothing more, just to make sure?
That's right. Yeah.
And here we're onboarding, thousands of accounts or hundreds of accounts that are in production in a matter of minutes, and giving the customers that visibility overnight, right? So that's like the biggest eye opener. And after that, we set up a session with a customer to help them understand, this is how you use the product. This is what we found. We create a report for the findings. You can obviously have reports from the product as well. And just really understanding, how are you liking it? What are you using it for? Do you see any gaps? Is there anything we can help with? And just trying to figure out if this is actually valuable for you in what you're looking to accomplish, right? And after that, typically, customer success gets involved. So, right? So if a customer says, yeah, I love it, it's great. We have a customer success engineering team and a manager team. So there's always someone with the customer that manages the full deployment. There's also a customer success engineer to do training whenever they need it, help with integrations, because obviously there's ticketing systems, there's messaging. So if a customer needs help with that, they will help how to build different queries. So we have, for the life of the customer, you have customer success engineers and managers with you, and it's not a rotated one, right? It's like, if you speak to Gus on day one, you'll be speaking to Gus on day 365, right? So we want to make sure that our customers have a relationship with the person that they're working with, so they don't have to re-explain everything all the time. Obviously, we have support, right? And
Yeah.
So let me ask two questions that I guess are more fun. What's personally for you is your, either favorite or the coolest thing you think Orca does? And then secondly, what's something maybe that Orca is working on improving or adding, if for a little, maybe if you could share a sneak peek or something that's coming down the roadmap?
so, coming from an endpoint security background, when I saw that you can identify workload problems and cloud problems without installing agents, I felt like that was a message from God for me, because, I have blue screened quite a few machines. I have, quarantined quite a few files, and, endpoint security is endpoint security, right? You have to kind of work through it. So for me, that's like the biggest thing, is the amount of time to value of just not being afraid to tell a customer, onboard all your production accounts and let's just see what's there, without worrying, am I going to bring down your systems, your production environment, and things like that. So that for me is like the biggest value and most favorite part, is it takes 15 minutes to do all this, and that's probably it. I'd probably say one of the most exciting things that's coming extremely shortly, and we have a lot of customers testing this, is around API security. Because as we know, if you're putting something in the cloud, someone has to see something, right? And oftentimes it's via APIs. And what we have found is that many customers do not know, forget just the cloud asset, APIs are even worse, right? It is very difficult to get that full inventory. And just kind of going on that holistic approach that we always have, which is, coverage and comprehensiveness. We started to, before you could obviously find API endpoints via the cloud providers and kind of give some risk, but it's more important to deep dive a little deeper on that, because when you start seeing the containers or EC2s and, having random systems up there that are serving APIs and are exposed, those unmanaged ones is really a big challenge for customers. And the way we're doing that is by using our side scanning technology to pull the info that we need to basically draw that map automatically, again, not using a single agent. So now not only can you identify the cloud provider API endpoints, but now you can also identify, an EC2 that has an API endpoint. They had no idea existed. No one told you about it. And, during this beta phase where we've had with customers, the most important part is adding all the other cloud context to that API, right? It's understanding that, yes, this API is public, it's not encrypted, but what is it actually serving? Well, we can show you, because now we can actually take screenshots, do some dynamic probing from the outside to see, hey, that we can get to this is what it'll serve. But think about like the endpoints, for example, that might be serving out PII from a bucket. We have that context, right? So now we can actually link a lot more things together and really give you some idea of what these things are. And, I've had customers say, wow, I thought we deleted that a couple of years ago, or I did not know that was serving that. So it's pretty eye-opening, and it's part of the product. So going with that whole mentality of, it's not just the cloud configuration, it's not just the workload, not just the vulnerabilities, it's whatever you're putting in the cloud that you need to know about.
So I want to tag one more question on to kind of in the same vein of Anthony's questions, without calling them out by name or putting them down. If there was one thing that you said you could tell us that really makes you stand out from your competitors in what's getting to be a space with some more companies in it, right? What's the one thing that you think really sets Orca apart from the rest?
We can probably talk about product all day long. But I think what really comes down to is trust with our teams. I think that's the most important. is we don't really go down the path of shaming other vendors or going down that path. It's really just focusing on the customer and simply saying, can we do it or not? Right? What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And we'll tell you, right? There's no sense in us, trying to bash people or other vendors. I mean, if they meet your needs, great. Like, what are we supposed to do? If that's what you like, that's what you like. But the most important part is, trying out Orca to see that cloud visibility, talking with your sales engineers or your customer success engineers, and really understanding what are your goals. And let's just be honest, we don't need to shame anyone into anything, right? And I think that's probably the biggest thing is trust, and that's typically what customers, sometimes we answer honestly, and they're like, wow, that was an honest answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I like that because quite frankly, over the years when I've seen a company take out one technology to add in another, it's usually not a technical issue with the other product. It has something to do with the relationship, the trust, the support, all of that stuff that you're talking about. So Orca focusing on that, I think, is a good thing. And also for all of you that are watching out there, that when we do our CSA events, we always say, hey, look, we don't just take anyone's money to do these events. We actually vet them out and make sure that we're bringing the very best content to you here or in any of our events. And Orca was just at CloudCon 22 as one of our main stage presenters. And again, we work really hard here to be sure that we're bringing companies that not only have great technology, but also understand, that there's a need to have an ongoing relationship and ensuring that you're getting the most out of your investments. So, fellas, I learned something today. I learned that chances are pretty good you don't really know your cloud environment as well as maybe you think you do. And you probably have a lot more vulnerabilities out there than what maybe you even thought of in your worst nightmares. So if you are concerned, if not, you should be, go watch the video over again. But if you are concerned about your cloud security, talk with Orca. Have a conversation with them and see more of what they're doing. With that, Gus, I really appreciate you being here with us today. An excellent conversation, and we appreciate the honesty because I think that is sometimes something that is missing in our industry, as well as everyone's trying to get sales taken care of. I did realize I forgot to mention Anthony and Lloyd earlier. We are the Really Bad Security crew. For all of you that are watching, subscribe. It'll pop up here somewhere. Make sure you're doing that. And we will see you all again for episode 36. Thanks, everybody.